We have to discuss for loop with in operator, for loop with off operator. Okay. So let's try to discuss about this in and off operator with for loop. So what is the purpose of all this? So the purpose of in and off operator is used to iterate your object and arrays. Means using for with in, using this for with in, we can iterate through the objects. We can iterate through the objects. And we can get the access of all the keys of object properties. It means in that object, whatever properties we will have, so we will get the access to the keys of those properties. For example, suppose I have an object here where obj. Let's assume in this object I have 4 properties, something like name, maybe something like Kabir. I might have something like ID. I might have something like CT. Okay, in the same way, something like email. Now, in this property, how many properties we have? We have totally 4 properties. We have totally 4 properties. Suppose if you want the access of the keys, like I want name, I want the access to ID, okay, or I want to access the CT, and I want to access the email. I want to access the keys. So if you want to access the keys, then we can use for with in operator. We can use for loop with the in operator. So let's see how we will get the access to all this property, like all these keys of this object property. So for that, we have to go with for in. So the syntax of this for in will be something like this. Syntax will be something like this. We have to use for open parenthesis, close parenthesis, open curly brace, close curly brace. It means we have to use like a for loop. Inside this parenthesis, we have to declare one variable. Suppose I'm taking var x, then we have to use in operator, then your object name, here object name. And here I can say variable declaration. Remember, I am using the term declaration. Okay, this is what we have to do. Variable declaration. And this is our object name. Now, what this in operator will do? It will go to this object. Okay, this in operator will go to the object. It will pick the first property. In that first property also, it will pick the key. It will pick the key of the first property, and that key will be added or will be stored inside this variable. It will be stored inside this variable. And then whatever statement you will write, those statement will get executed. So if you want to print the key, simply print this variable. Then the key of that particular object will be printed. Suppose once first object key is accessed, then it will check, do you have another property? If you have another property, again it will go to that second property. It will pick the key of that property. Remember, key, not value. And that key will be stored here. Again, for loop will execute. So this entire process will go through till all the properties of this object are covered. So let's take one example, you will get it. So let me go back here. Let me create here something called for in.js. Remember, in operator we have to use with object. So I should have an object. Now here I can have a keys like name, maybe something like Gia. I can have something like gender, maybe female. I can have something like here ID, some 101, and city, something like Delhi. Okay, now I want the access of these keys. I want access of keys. So for that, what I will do? Simply I will use this for loop. For loop. Inside this first part is variable declaration. So I will declare one variable. We know how to declare a variable, var x. This is how we declare the variable. Space, use the in operator. In is an operator. It is a special operator. Space, your object name. Object name is obj. So I will write obj. That's it. This is how we have to define. Now, here simply I will do console.log of x. Console.log of x. That's it. So let's see what it will print in the x. Now, if I execute this file, node for -in. Now see, it is printing all. It is printing all the keys. It is printing all the keys of our properties. It is just printing the keys of the properties. Suppose I want to print value also. Can you tell me how to print the value? I want to print the value also. I want to print something like this. I want my output in the console should be something like this. I want name, then I want here Zia. So like this, I want to print all the properties in my console. So in that case, what we have to do? Simply here add comma, in double quotes, add colon. If I do like this, x comma, if I do colon, what happens? Let's see. It is printing name colon, gender colon, ID colon, city colon. Now I want to access value. Can you tell me how to access the value here? How to access the value? How to access the value? You have object name, you have key name. So can you access value if you have object name, if you know the key name? If you know the object name, if you know the key name, can you access the value? So here obj is the object name. Okay, use square brackets and pass your x here. Because inside x we are storing key, right? So object of key is nothing but you will be able to access the property value. Now see here you are able to access all the property values. Okay, here x will not work. Here dot operator will not work. If I do dot x, it will not work. So let's see dot x will work or not. Now see everywhere it is printing undefined, 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 undefined. So remember, whenever you want to access object properties, object values dynamically, whenever you want to access object values dynamically, then dot operator will fail. Dot operator will fail. So here we have to go with square bracket. We have to go with square bracket. So dot operator will not work. If you remember, while understanding about the object, I have told you, right? We can access the properties of object using two ways. Using dot operator and using the square brackets. And I have told you, find out the answer, where to use dot operator and where we have to use square bracket. So in your interviews, they will ask, can you explain me the difference between dot operator and the square brackets? Or they can ask, can you tell me the scenario where dot operator will not work? Or they will say, can you tell me the scenario where square bracket will not work? Square bracket will not work. Okay, so this kind of questions you guys can face in your interviews when it comes to object concept. So here object of X. Now see, we will be able to access all the values. Okay, so that is why guys, whenever I say go and explore something, please go and explore. I'm pretty sure you will learn so many things whenever you go and explore those questions. You will learn so many things. Just try once, you will understand it. Okay, so in operator is used to iterate through your object. In the same way, we have for operator, off operator. For loop with off. Now this for with off is used to iterate through array. So if you want to iterate through array, this is one more way. Syntax is very similar to your for in. So here you can use for. Same thing here, variable declaration. Off operator. Then your array name. So for off, you can go with array. For in, you can go with object. Open curly brace, close curly brace. Okay, same thing. But here you have to use array. That's it. For off. So I can just take one array. Okay, I'm just taking some array here. Simply I will use for variable declaration. Whatever variable name you want to give, you can give whatever you want of your array name. Now, if I just try to print here X, if I just try to print here A, let's see what it will print. Okay, I'm just trying to print A. Now see, it is accessing each and every element of your array. It is accessing each and every element of your array. So in your interviews, they will ask, what is the difference between for off and for in? What is the difference between for off and for in? Can I use object for off? Can I use here object? Can I use array for in? Okay, this experiment you guys try. Just try this experiment and check whether you can use for in for arrays. Can you use for off for object? If yes, okay. If not, what error message you are getting or what result you are getting? Just try to observe that result. Just try to observe that result. Okay. So this is for in and for off. So here we have done with the basics of JavaScript. Now we have to enter into the advanced concepts of JavaScript. In that advanced concept, the first topic what we are going to learn is DOM and DOM manipulation. DOM and DOM manipulation. Okay, so can you guys tell me what is DOM in JavaScript? Or if I ask you what is document object model? What is document object model in JavaScript? Anybody knows the answer for this? If you know the answer for this, you guys can raise your hands. If you know the answer for this, you guys can raise your hands. There might be some people, right, who already know the JavaScript at least little bit, or maybe they are good with the JavaScript. So do you know what is document object model? In short, we can say DOM. Do you know what is DOM in JavaScript? Shravan, X is variable, right? In that case, X is a variable. So that is the reason we don't pass in double quotes. Anybody knows what is document object model? Okay, so let me explain you what is document object model. What is document object model means? It is a structure. It is a structure of all HTML elements which are converted into objects, and those objects we call as a nodes. What is document object model? It is a structure of HTML elements which are converted into objects and arranged all these objects in tree data structure. It is a structure of HTML elements which are converted into objects and arranged all the objects in tree data structure, or I can say they are placed in the tree data structure. Now, what is the meaning of this? Let's try to understand. Let's assume that you created one HTML document. This is our HTML document. Okay, something like index.html. Let's assume that inside this HTML document, you wrote some HTML code. Now, this HTML document you will load in the browser. This HTML document you will load in the browser. Now, whenever this HTML document is loaded in the browser, inside your browser, there is one software. Or we can say one program called browser engine. Something called browser engine, which is responsible for parsing your HTML document. So what this browser engine will do? This browser engine will read all your HTML content from this file in the form of bytes. It will read all your HTML content in the form of bytes. Now, all these bytes will be converted into characters. Then all these characters will be converted into tokens, something called tokens. all these tokens will be converted into objects called node. So what your browser engine will do, it will start reading each and every content of your HTML document in the form of bytes. Now those bytes will be converted into characters. Characters will be converted into something called tokens. And from tokens, it will convert everything into objects. It means all your HTML elements are converted into objects called nodes. All those objects we are going to call as a nodes. Technically, they are called as a nodes. Now, all these nodes are linked with each other. Now, what your browser will do, it will link all the nodes in a sequence. It will link all the nodes in the sequence. And all these nodes will be placed in tree data structure. In the tree data structure. And that tree data structure we are going to call as a DOM. And that tree data structure we are going to call as a DOM. We are going to call as a DOM. So let me show you how this DOM is created on very high level. Let me show you very high level how DOM is created. Let's suppose I created one simple document here. So let's suppose I'm starting my document with HTML tag. Inside HTML tag, I have head section. Inside head section, let's suppose I have style. Maybe I have script. I have title. Okay, like this, I can have any number of tags. I can have link. Close this head. Okay, let me just decrease the size. Let's suppose I have body. Inside this body, let's suppose I have one div. Inside that, let's suppose I am taking two more divs. Okay, here let's suppose I am taking one H2 tag. Here one paragraph tag. Let's suppose this is how I have created my HTML document. Now, whenever I load this document in my browser, now all these HTML elements will be converted into DOM. Nothing but it will be converted into objects. Now, once all your HTML elements are converted into objects, now all those objects will be linked. How they will going to link means your browser will start with one window object, something called window object. Under this window object, it will add one document object. Okay. Now internally, this window is also an object. Document is also object. Now who created this objects? Your browser created this object. Now this window object represents your entire window. It represents your entire window. So on this entire window, if you want to do some kind of operations, then inside this object, you will have lot of properties. You will have lot of properties. Using those properties, you can do any kind of operation on these windows. You can do any dynamic operation on these windows. This document object will represent your HTML document. This document object will represent your HTML document. Entire HTML document. And under this document object, now all your HTML elements will be added, which are converted into objects. And they will be added in the sequence the way you have created it. All the HTML elements will be added in this tree as per your HTML document. So it will start with HTML. Then you will have here head section. So under HTML, you have here head section. You have body section. Because head and body are the two direct children. So they will be added like a children. Here head and here body. And under body, you have title, you have script, you have style. Now all these tags will be added. Style, your script, your title, your link. Under body, you have one div. So here, let me add all those. Style, we have script, we have title, we have link. Under body, we have div. So one div will be added. Under this div, we have two more divs. So div 1, div 2. So under this, we have div. Here also div and here also div. And under this div, you have paragraph, and under this div, you have h2. So here we have h2, and under this div, we have paragraph. So the way you create your HTML document, in that way only this structure will be created. And this structure, this entire structure, we are going to call as a DOM. We are going to call as a DOM. We are going to call as a DOM. So how your DOM is created? In the same way for your CSS also. For your CSS code also, this kind of structure will be created. And that structure we are going to call as CSS SOM. It means two structures will be created, DOM and SOM. DOM will be created based on your HTML elements. This will be created based on your CSS properties. Who will create now? Your browser will create. Your browser will create these two structures. And in these two structures, all your HTML elements are converted into objects. All your CSS properties are converted into objects. All HTML elements are converted into objects. All CSS properties are converted into objects. And based on this two structure, it will create final structure. It will combine both this structure, and it will create one final structure. And that final structure we are going to call as a rendering tree. Rendering tree. So it will combine DOM and SOM, and it will create rendering tree. And based on this rendering tree, your browser will paint your screen. Nothing but your UI will be created. Your UI will be created and it will be visible to screen. So basically we say it paints the screen. So internally, this much things the browser will do. This many things the browser will do. So if I just create here one HTML file, something like index.html, and if I write some HTML code here, and if I load this HTML code, sorry, if I load this HTML document in my browser, now your browser will go through this entire process. Browser will go through this entire process. After finishing this entire process only, you will be able to see this kind of user interface on this screen. This kind of user interface on this screen. Now just imagine how powerful the browser is, how powerful this tool is, and how fast it is doing all these things. So browser is very powerful tool. Now why your browser is doing this kind of tasks or this kind of actions? Anybody knows why browser is creating a DOM or SOM structure? Why this DOM is created? Why DOM is created? Basically, your browser is going to create the DOM so that using JavaScript, we can manipulate the HTML document. We can manipulate the HTML document so that we can create dynamic user interface. Dynamic user interface. Now, why DOM is created? The DOM is created so that using JavaScript, we can manipulate. Manipulate means it is a process of adding something. It is a process of modifying something. It is a process of deleting something. It is a process of accessing something. Okay, that entire thing we are going to call as a manipulate. So DOM is created so that using JavaScript, we can manipulate the HTML document. Now, why to manipulate HTML document? So we want to manipulate HTML document so that we can create dynamic user interface. We can create dynamic user interface. So now using JavaScript, if you have a JavaScript, using this JavaScript, you can perform any kind of operation. You can perform any kind of operation on this DOM tree, on this DOM structure. What kind of operations you can perform? Using this JavaScript, if you want, you can add new element inside this div. If you want, you can add new element. You can add new element inside this div. So currently in this div, we have only two elements, two more divs. If I want, I can add here one more element. Something like I want to add one more paragraph here. So I can add one paragraph. If I want, what I can do using this JavaScript, I can change the content of this paragraph. I can change the content of this paragraph. Maybe in this paragraph, I am showing some content. Now using JavaScript, I can change the content of this paragraph. If I want, Using JavaScript, if using JavaScript, I can remove this element. I can remove this element. I can remove this element. It means you can change the content, you can add a new element, you can remove existing element, you can modify the content or element also. So this kind of operation you can do. And this entire operation we are going to call as a DOM manipulation. Or I can say, using JavaScript, if you are able to manipulate HTML document, and if you are able to create dynamic user interface, then that entire process we are going to call as a DOM manipulation. DOM manipulation means changing the DOM. Whatever DOM you have, you are just changing that DOM. Now, why we have to change the DOM? Why we have to do this DOM manipulation? So that we can create dynamic user interface. We can create dynamic user interface. Understood now why browser is doing all these operations? Why all your HTML elements are converted into objects? Why all those objects are arranged in a sequence, in a tree kind of structure? That is because of creating the dynamic user interface. So basically, using JavaScript, we can manipulate that DOM and we can create dynamic user interface. Okay, now how to access any DOM element or DOM node? Nothing but HTML element. How to add new HTML element, or how to remove existing HTML element, or how to change content or attributes of HTML element. How to do all this? How to do all this? How to perform all this operation? Now we understood DOM structure is created so that using JavaScript, we can add element, we can remove element, we can modify the content, we can modify the attributes, we can access the elements. Okay, we can do all this with JavaScript, but how? But the question is how? So for this, to do all this operation, browser, remember browser is providing us predefined objects and functions. So to do all this operation, remember browser, not JavaScript. Browser is providing us predefined objects and functions. And those objects and functions we are going to call as a DOM API. You might have heard the term called DOM API. Using DOM APIs, we can do so many things. So all those things we are going to call as a DOM APIs. So here DOM APIs are nothing but they are referring to predefined objects and functions. They are referring to predefined functions and predefined objects. I hope you guys understood what is DOM, why DOM is created, and how DOM is going to get manipulated. No, you cannot see DOM. You cannot see DOM. Okay, internally browser is doing, and whatever I have explained, just they have given in the documentation of browser. So if you want to know, you have to go and read documentation of browser. Okay, now again, that is a separate concept. Now here we are going to focus only on JavaScript, not on how browsers are created. Okay, so this is what they have told us, and this is what I am telling you. Okay, now can you, if you ask me, can I see practically all this entire process? No, you cannot see, because they didn't give us any kind of feature to see this. Because all this will happen such a fast, you cannot see that. Now they have given in the documentation, so we have to blindly follow it. Okay, so now let's first learn how to access any HTML element in the JavaScript. How to access any HTML element in the JavaScript. Suppose I created like this HTML document. Now my requirement is I want to access this H2. This H2 I want to access. This H2 I want to access in my JavaScript. So let's see how to access any HTML element in the JavaScript. So to access any HTML element in the JavaScript, we have three ways. You can access any HTML element, not three ways, we have four ways. Using ID, its ID value, or using its class name, nothing but class value, or using its tag name, or using name attribute. Using name attribute. These are the four different ways to access any HTML element in the JavaScript. In this, ID is the standard. ID is the standard which will be followed by a lot of different technologies internally. And in our real time also, maximum we will go with ID approach only. Because ID helps us to recognize certain element or a specific element. It gives the uniqueness for an element. So how to access any HTML element in the JavaScript means we have four ways. The first way is using ID value or class value or tag name or using name attribute. Something called name attribute. Using name attribute also, you can access your HTML elements in the JavaScript. Now accessing HTML elements is nothing but once the DOM tree is created. Now I want to access any element. Here I want to access this H2. So I'm just trying to make you understand how to access the H2. Because once you are able to access H2, then only on this H2, you can do some kind of operation. Like if you want, you can add another element in the reference of H2, or else you can remove H2, or else you can change the style or the content of H2. It means if you want to perform any operation on H2, or based on H2, then you have to get the reference. First of all, you have to get the access. Okay, here I can use the word access or reference. Access, or I can use the term reference. So I have to get the reference of HTML element in the JavaScript. Before we learn this, first let's try to understand how to integrate HTML and JavaScript. How to integrate HTML and JavaScript. Suppose if I create here HTML document, this is my HTML document. Now inside this HTML file, if I want to write JavaScript, in this HTML file, if I want to write JavaScript, then we can use something called script tag. We can use something called script tag. Now this script tag, you can add inside your header section, or you can add inside your body section also. Script tag you can add in body section, or you can add in header section also. Now inside this script tag, we can write our JavaScript code. We can write our JavaScript code. Any JavaScript code you can write. I can create one function here. Function fn. Inside this, I can create variables where x equals to something like 501. I can create where ct equals to Delhi. I can use if. I can say here x should be less than 1000. If x is less than 1000, I just want to do some operation here. Console.log, do some operation. It means inside your HTML document, if you want to write JavaScript code, then you have to use something called script tag. You have to use something called script tag. In that script tag, you can write your JavaScript code. Okay, now if I load this document in my browser, it looks something like this. Here HTML document is loaded. But now I want to execute this function. I want to execute this function. So can you tell me, without calling the function, can we execute it? Without calling the JavaScript function, can we execute it? Without calling the function, we cannot execute the JavaScript function. So can I call here like this? Now, if I call, do you think that if I reload my page, do you think that that function got called? That function got called? Yes, that function got called because you have called it. Now this function got executed. Now where to see this console message? Where to see this console message inside our browser? Inside our browser, if I want to see that console message, where to see? So for that, just right click anywhere on your browser. Then you will have the option called inspect. Click on that inspect. Then this part is called developer tool. This entire thing is called developer tool. Your developer tool will be opened. Now here you will have some tabs. You have welcome tab, you have element tab, you have something called console tab here. Just click on that console. Now whenever you click on the console, you will see all your console messages. You will see all your console messages. Now see here we got that console message. Do some operation. So where to see your console messages inside your browser means here inside your developer tool you have to see. So how to open this? Just right click anywhere, right click. You will get the inspect option. Click on that inspect. Go to the console. You will be able to see all your console messages. Okay. Okay, fine. Okay, this is the one way. One more way is you can create one separate JavaScript file. You can create one separate JavaScript file. Your entire JavaScript code you can remove from here. You can add here. You can add here. And this script tag, nothing but this JavaScript file, this JavaScript file you have to integrate or you have to link with your HTML file. How to link your external JavaScript file with HTML file means, for that again use script tag only. And inside the script tag, use src attribute. And inside this src attribute, add the location or path of your JavaScript file. Now both are present in the same folder, so I can directly add index.js. Now this is one more way of integrating your JavaScript with HTML. So in this, we are creating a separate file. Now like this, I can create any number of files. I can create something called home.js. I can have here some code of JavaScript. Now, can I integrate this JavaScript file with this HTML? Yes, you can integrate. Again, take the script tag. Again, take src attribute, add home.js. Now, how many JavaScript file I can integrate? Any number of JavaScript file you can integrate. Any number of JavaScript file you can integrate. So this is one more way of integrating JavaScript with our HTML. JavaScript with our HTML. Is this 2 points clear, guys? How to integrate HTML and JavaScript? Understood? 2 ways. Okay. Understood why DOM tree is created? Why DOM tree is created, and using JavaScript, what we can do? What do you mean by DOM and DOM manipulation? If someone asks you what is DOM and DOM manipulation, can you explain them? What is DOM and DOM manipulation? Okay, in your interviews, always explain your own words. Always explain the answers in your own words. The way you understood the concept, in that way only you explain it. No need to give any standard definitions. Okay, if you give the standard definitions, people will think that you have just mugged up. You have just mugged up those concepts. So always in your interviews, give the answers based on your understanding. No need to take the pressure of giving the answers the way it is defined in the standard documentations or on certain articles. Okay. So in your interviews, always give the answers in your own words. Give the answer. Suppose if you are not able to define the concept suddenly, then explain one example. If he asks what is DOM, you are not able to explain the definition, or you forgot the definition, then explain one example. Just tell, okay, suppose if I have this like this scenario, now let's suppose I have a document. In that document, I have one H2 element. Now my requirement is to change that H2 element content. So for that, I will be using something called DOM APIs. So explain something like that. If you don't remember the definitions, okay, because if you give like this explanation, at least opposite person can understand, okay, you might not be able to recall the definition, but you know the concept. So this kind of impression you might get. But this kind of impression you will get only if opposite person is a technical person. Suppose if non-technical person is taking your interview. Let's suppose there is a person who don't have much knowledge on JavaScript. Now what he will do? He will come with some set of questions. And with the answers also he will come. Now whenever you give the answer, he will compare your answer with the answer he have in his document. If it is matching, he will think that you know the concept. If it is not matching, he will think that you are wrong. Though you are right. Now that is our bad luck. That we cannot control. Okay. So maximum all the technical persons will only take your interviews, but sometimes there are chances that some non-technical person might take your interviews. Yeah, that's what you can say. Okay. Yeah. So now let's come back here. Let's focus on this part. How to access any HTML element in the JavaScript. Okay, first let's see using ID value. Let's try using ID value first. Now let's suppose I have one button here. Okay, button, something called change H2 content. My button name is change H2 content. Now my requirement is if I click on this button, I want to change this content. I want to change this content. It means on my H2, I want to perform some operation. I want to perform some operation. So whenever you want to perform some operation on your H2 element, first get the access of that HTML element in the JavaScript. How to get the access? Let's suppose I am giving the ID to this H2 element. Something like I am giving title. Let's suppose I am creating one function here. Function change H2 content. Now my requirement is very simple. If I click on this button, this function should be called. This function should be called, and inside this function, I need to write the logic. I need to write the logic so that I can change the content of this H2. So to do that, first thing, the first step is step 1. Get the reference or access of HTML element. So technically you are getting the reference of DOM element, DOM node. Okay. But just for your understanding sake, I am using the term HTML element. How to get? So to access any HTML element, we can take the help of one predefined object. We can take the help of one predefined object called document. There is one predefined object called document. Now it is a predefined object. In this object, there is one property. There is one property called get element by ID. And the value of this property is one function. Value of this property is one function. And this function will take one parameter, that is your ID value. And already some logic has been written inside this function. Now this is predefined object. This is predefined function. This is predefined function. Now if you call this function, and if you pass ID of any HTML element, then this function will return the reference of that HTML element. If you call this function and if you pass ID of any HTML element, then this function will return the reference of that HTML element. Now tell me how to call this function. Can anybody tell me how to call this function? You have a document object, you have a property. I want to call this function. How to call this function? Anybody? How to call this function? You know object name, you know property key name. How to call the function? Yeah, that's it. Document dot get element by ID. And what you have to pass? You have to pass ID. So pass the ID in the form of string. You can use double quotes or single quotes. That's it. You have to just write this line, document dot get element by ID. So now here I can say document dot get element by ID. Pass the title. because here ID value is title. So I am passing title. Now what this line will do? This line will return. It will return the reference of H2 element. Nothing but it is returning this H2 element. It is giving us that H2 element. Now you just cache that reference in one variable, something called H2 reference. Now inside this variable, you have the H2 element reference. And once you have any HTML element reference, on that element, you can perform any kind of operation. On that element or based on that element, you can perform any kind of operation. If you have the reference of that HTML element. Reference is nothing but you have the access of memory location of that element. Now what I want to do, step 2. I just want to change the content of H2. Now this is reference. Internally reference is object type. Internally reference is object type. It means if I say here var H2 ref, this is also object type. This is also object type like this. Now this is also predefined object. It is also predefined object. Now inside this object, there will be one property called inner text. And by default, inside this property, whatever content you have added, this content in between opening tag and closing tag, that content will be added here by default. By default, you will have this content in that property. Okay, so there are so many properties. I'm just mentioning one property here. Inside this document object also, you will have so many properties. Okay, I'm just mentioning you one property as of now. Now, internally, H2 ref looks like something like this. Now, if you know the object name, if you know the property key name, can you change this content? Can you modify this content? So can I write something like this? H2 ref dot inner text equals to I will say DOM manipulated. I will just write here DOM manipulated. So let's see whether this content will be added or not. So I will go back here. I will just add that content. H2ref dot inner text equals to DOM manipulated using JavaScript. I will just add here using JavaScript. Now, if I go back here, now if I click on this, do you think this part will change? If I click on this, this part will change. Any guess? Now see, if I am clicking, there is no change. Why there is no change? Because you did not call this function. You did not call this function. So I want to call this function whenever I click on the button. So for that, we can use one attribute called onClick. We can use one attribute called onClick. And the value of this attribute should be your function call. Value of this attribute should be your function call. So attribute name is onClick and the value of this attribute should be your function call. So what is your function call? Change H2 content. So I will just copy this and I will paste here. Okay, technically it is called event listener and it is called event handler. So we will learn about these terms once we start with event concept. So as of now, you consider onClick as one attribute. Key name is onClick and value is a function call. So if you add this attribute on click of this button, this function will be called. If I go back here, now if I click on this, now see I got here DOM manipulated using JavaScript. DOM manipulated using JavaScript. Now see, using JavaScript, are you able to manipulate? So whenever there is a change in the DOM structure, what your browser will do, whenever there is some change in the DOM structure, it will recreate rendering tree. It will recreate your rendering tree. Because your DOM got changed. Whether DOM got changed or SOM got changed, anyone if changes get modified, then this rendering tree will be recreated. And once the rendering tree is recreated, your browser will be repainted. And whenever your browser is repainted, you will see the output on the screen. Now, if I refresh, I got here DOM concept. If I click on this button, I got DOM manipulated using JavaScript. Okay. Now, if you are able to change, like this content of your interface, if you are able to change the content or style of your user interface, then that user interface is called dynamic. It is called dynamic user interface now. Because you are able to change content dynamically. You are able to add the content dynamically. You are able to remove the content dynamically. So now we can say this is a dynamic user interface. If I don't add JavaScript, then you cannot change the content of your user interface. You cannot change the style of your user interface. That is the reason it is called static user interface. Okay, is it clear? Did you understood how to access HTML element in JavaScript using ID approach? So we will see all this approach. I will show one example of all this approach. But ID is the standard which we follow in our React also. Maximum place we will go with ID only. Because once you start creating the documents, maximum 99% for each and every element we will assign ID. So now here I just created it. Now let's suppose I want to change paragraph. I want to change the paragraph content. Can I change paragraph content on the click of this button? Yes. So what I need to do? First, I need to assign the ID. Some ID. I need to get the reference of paragraph. So get the reference of paragraph var pref equals to document dot get element by ID of content. Then simply do pref dot inner text equals to, just add some sentence, just add something. Okay, I will just add here something. I will just take this content. Okay, I will just copy this part and I will add here. Now let's try. Now see, our paragraph content got changed. My paragraph content got changed. Now, can you change the button content? Like if I click on this button, I want some different message on the button. Okay, you take that as an assignment. I'm changing H2 content. I am changing paragraph content. You try to change the button content. The way I have done for H2 and paragraph, in the same way you have to do for button also. So you take that as an assignment. Okay. Yeah. So that's all guys from my end. So let's continue remaining thing in tomorrow's session.